Okay, where we have a quorum, we'll go ahead and get started. I will open the Freetown-Lakeville Regional Finance Subcommittee, February 10th at 6:30 p.m. I'll do a quick roll call. Rich LaCamera,
Here, Board of Selectmen, Lakeville.
Katie,
Here. Freetown.
Darren,
Lakeville Finance Committee here.
great, and Jean Fox.
Here.
Okay. Yeah. Also present is Mr. Medeiros, the superintendent, and Kara Lees, the director of finance. Anyone else recording the meeting?
Steve, I would just probably note at this point, so that means that both finance committees are represented at this time. The Board of Selectmen and Lakeville are represented, and both for the school committee perspective, both towns of Freetown and Lakeville are represented by you and Mrs. Fox.
That is correct.
I know you're going to update the group on the status on the Board of Selectmen rep for Freetown momentarily. Thank you.
Yep. So Freetown still has not determined their rep. They were supposed to do that at the last meeting. And they informed us recently that they still have not determined who the rep would be. But we do have a quorum here, so we will continue forward. I am going to go right into number 2, old business. Kara, this is the FY21 budget update. Can you go through some of that information?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Included in your packet is a general fund overview for FY21 year-to-date through February 4th, 2021. Revenues of $22.4 million and expenditures of $19.9 million are reasonable compared to the prior year. And we will continue to closely monitor the results of operations compared to the budget. The assessment sheet has been updated since the original budget had passed for 2 items. The first was the Chapter 70 reduction related to FY21, where it had been level funded, resulting in a reduction from the original budget of $84,900. The shortfalls will be covered by a reduction in extended school year salaries from the summer session, as well as alternative funding options, thus having no projected impact on the assessments from the towns. The second update on the assessment sheet was a reduction in Chapter 71 transportation by $291,258, where the district had expended significantly less in transportation during FY20 than what was originally budgeted due to the pandemic. As a result, the state recomputed the reimbursement to be based on the actual lesser expenditures. The shortfalls are essentially covered by an adjustment, an increase in the anticipated revenues from circuit breaker, where $520,000 was originally budgeted for FY21. However, the district is required to spend the remaining carry forward fund balance entirely, which is $780,000. Therefore, the Chapter 71 adjustment is not anticipated to have an impact to the assessments to the towns as well. That concludes FY21. I'm open for any questions.
I've got a question on the circuit breaker. You said that I believe the number was $781,000 is being carried forward to fiscal 22. Is that correct?
That's being carried forward from fiscal 20 to fiscal 21.
Okay, so was it used in fiscal 21?
We are using it in fiscal 21. That's correct.
So all of it besides what was already given to the region?
So originally the assessment had projected 520,000, and now I'm saying that really the projection should be at 780,000.
Okay, but my question is all that money that was provided used in the fiscal 21 budget?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
We are in the midst of transferring the expenditures out of the general fund to cover that. Right now, the expenditures are in the general fund. The general fund will be relieved and be transferred to the circuit breaker fund.
Okay.
Any other questions by any of the members? Ms. Lees, you want to go on to E&D and capital budget projects?
Sure. I believe the E&D portion related to fiscal 20, is that correct? Not fiscal 21?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like me to report on the E&D fiscal 20 first, Steve?
Please.
Okay. Our FY20 financial position closed at a surplus of $1.1 million in the general fund. Included in your packet summarizes those significant components where savings from transportation accounted for $839,000. And that relates to what I just discussed in relation to Chapter 71 due to the pandemic and shutting down. We had savings there. Insurance services also saw savings from the budget of $575,000. Normally, in the prior year, it was more like $250,000. The insurance savings resulted from the budget included an estimate of 4.3% increase, where the rate for active health plans offered a 4.2% decrease instead. So the budget had shown a 4.3% increase. However, when we received the rates from Maya Health Plan, the majority of that was really a 4.2% decrease. However, our retirees were actually in the ballpark, a 3 to 4% increase, depending on which plan they were enrolled in. The other piece is that our membership, our actual membership, resulted in a few less than we originally projected. So if we want to discuss insurance as it relates to FY21, we had budgeted a rate increase of 1.85%, but actually received an increase of 2.9%. We did receive a premium holiday of 1/2 of a month due to the pandemic, which I believe will fill that gap. For FY22 planning for insurance, we will be sure to refine our budget estimates in FY22 in conjunction with our RFP process that we're currently in the process with.
Questions on E&D? Mr.
Yes,
LaCamera?
Thank you. So you had a savings of $572,000. Did that savings get reflected in fiscal 21's budget?
This would be fiscal 20.
No, but if you saved 572 in fiscal 20, did you save $572,000 beginning in fiscal 21?
No, in fiscal 21, I believe the estimates are much closer, where we had estimated an increase of 1.85%, and our actual rate increased slightly more than that, 2.9%. So I believe that we'll see FY21 have a much smaller budgetary gap.
But if your basis went down by $572,000, is that correct? Your year ended on 20, right? Which means your basis for your health insurance went down by $572,000, right? Starting before you started fiscal 21.
That's correct. So I did look back to how the prior finance director computed the FY21 budget, and I do believe that we're not going to have as much large of a gap. It will not be quite anything like this.
No, but my point, Kara, is that if you budgeted $1 million, and just you're throwing numbers out, okay, and it came in $500,000 less, did you start fiscal 21 with $500,000 as the basis?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, I'm with you. Yeah.
Okay. So you would have saved potentially $500,000 in fiscal 21 before you began the budget process.
Potentially. Right. I would like to go back and look at, I did look back at the estimates that were used by the prior finance director for FY21, and I believe that they will be a lot closer. I understand what you're saying. You're saying that if we started with the budget in FY20 that was overstated, then we're using that as our basis for FY21 budgeting. I understand what you're saying, but our rate actually is coming in higher in FY21 than we originally projected as well. Plus, I'd have to look at the mix to see if the number of individuals enrolled in the plans were on target for how we budgeted. I do believe, based on the budget spreadsheet that the prior finance director put together, that the numbers will be much closer to the actual, will be much closer to the budget that was provided for. In FY22, we also plan on refining those estimates even further.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I keep asking the question is that if it was $1 million in 20, then it should be $500,000 beginning in 21, right?
Yep.
So the difference between what was budgeted and projected as an increase, you had not only the increase, but you potentially had another $500,000 increase?
I'll have to go back and take another look.
Because that seems like a pretty big number.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next question down there is that the region was certified for $1.6 million in their E&D before you subtracted the two amounts below. In the previous year was $600,000. Right?
Correct. Yes.
That's $1 million difference between 1 year in surplus versus another. So the question I have on the Chromebook purchases of 481 and the PPE supplies of $100,000. Why wasn't that set up as a grant account instead of offsetting it with E&D?
So Massachusetts DESE actually gave advice, and this of course is prior to my time because I started during the beginning of FY21. But Massachusetts DESE had given advice for finance directors to leave the COVID-related transactions in the general fund until they received notification of official approval, if you will, that they would be funded by the COVID CARES funding, which these transactions would ultimately be. These were encumbrances, and our auditors are actually still reviewing to determine if they, in fact, should be reflected in FY20 as this reduction, or if they really should be reflected in FY21 as an expenditure under this special revenue funds. So I'm actually having discussions with the auditors now as we speak regarding these transactions. Because they were encumbered into the general fund, and it did pass the DOR review when they did the E&D certification, they were reflected as a reduction in the general fund to E&D. When we receive the reimbursements on these monies in FY21, essentially the reimbursements will be added back into the E&D. The general fund will be made whole for these reductions.
As you know, the towns did the same thing, but we did not offset, any expenses, against our free cash, which is the same as E&D. We were told by the Department of Revenue to set up a grant account. And then when the money came in, it would offset, the cost of that grant. So I don't understand that logic. I'm sorry, which means that based upon what we got here, there's almost $600,000 available in E&D potentially that wouldn't be available until 22. Is that correct?
It would be FY21, and then yes, it would close into E&D for FY22. Yeah, that's correct.
That's too bad because that's important.
I
Okay.
I understand your issue. I understand the question at hand. In fact, it was one of the first things that I had, looked at as a finance director coming in, and I did start the discussions with the auditors right away.
Because the CARES Act funding was approved on March 25th, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So it was plenty of time and everybody had the opportunity to submit. And I don't know when the first one was submitted to from the region from us, but.
So when I had started at the district, a reimbursement request had not yet been submitted. We were still waiting on some invoices. And then once I had started, the invoices had come in. I want to say our first reimbursement request might've been in September. So.
I wish I had that sheet. I do here somewhere, but I don't remember, but. Okay, so I mean, that's an opportunity for the region that could have had $1.6 million versus $1 million as far as the budget is concerned. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on E&D? Seeing none, we'll go on to capital projects.
Yes, so that would be in relation to our train project. Just a little context, in FY20, the district performed a study related to heating and AC equipment. At that time, it was discovered that boiler replacements, along with other energy savings initiatives, allowed the district to engage in a performance contract where we could utilize our energy savings to finance the improvements over an 18-year period. The funding of $5,946,403 was secured in late August 2020. The funding was received into a separately established bank account at Bank of America. Over a 20-year period, the bond lease financing cost for principal and interest is projected to be $7.5 million, with projected energy savings to be $8.8 million, a net surplus over 20 years of $1.3 million. To date, we are approaching approximately 55% completion under the contract. Updates in the status of completion are as follows. For the high school, boilers are approximately 95% complete. The domestic hot water system approximately 80% complete. Lighting upgrades approximately 50% complete. Middle school, the boilers are about 15% complete. The majority of the work is scheduled for the February break. Domestic hot water system, approximately 20% complete. A new chiller, approximately 80% complete. The lighting project, 95% complete. Electric transformer, 75% complete. The intermediate school, boilers are about 50% complete. Domestic hot water system and pool heater, 75% complete. Pool cover, 100% complete. Lighting upgrades, 95% complete. And electric transformers about 100% complete. That concludes the train summary. Are there any questions?
Yeah, was this a lease or a bond?
This was a lease.
And what was the interest rate on the lease?
I'd have to go back and check. I don't recall offhand.
And I'm sorry to ask the question, but why wasn't it bonding instead of leasing? It would have saved a lot more money.
I'm sorry, that was before my time. I'm not sure if Rick could comment on that. I was at the tail end of it, really.
Because we actually had that discussion the last time the FinCom met, having to do with the options of lease versus going out to bond, because the bond payments right now, the interest rates are like 1.5% to 2%. And I think the lease that was being talked about was 6 to 7%.
Well, I don't know that we ended up getting a rate that high. I'd have to check. Let me see if I happen to have it with me.
That's
right
okay. No, that's okay. It's done. It's done.
Yeah, they went through both those options, Mr. LaCamera, when they were doing the bond versus lease. And I don't think it was that high, but it is recorded at one of the school committee meetings, so we can present that.
Okay, the question I have for when we get to fiscal 22's budget, the projected savings are $329,000, and the bond lease is $319,000. Are we going to reach that goal?
I would hope so. So I actually have spoken to some other schools that have a similar type of a project. And my understanding is that they've gotten reports from the energy contractor to really, ensure that the energy savings are being met. And so the director of facilities and I are going to have some discussions with our contractor to ensure that we're going to get these reports once the project is completed. And we are planning on capturing these savings. And I did plan for it in the budget process.
So you plan for $329,000 savings?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the TRAN project?
Yeah, one more question, Mr. Chairman. Was there any change orders for the project?
There have been no change orders.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to 2B, COVID-19 expense reports.
I have included in your packet some details surrounding our COVID-19 transactions. The first page is more of a summary broken out between FY20 FY21 fall and FY21 spring projections. And the second page provides some additional details. We have been very grateful for the support we have received from our member towns from their CARES funds allocations, as well as other state and federal funding opportunities. We couldn't have navigated these waters without the support, more specifically from our member towns. In FY20, we had approximately $580,000 of COVID-related expenditures, of which we were able to secure funding for a majority of those transactions. We have one pending receipt from Plymouth County for FY20 of $285,000, and I have heard that it is approved. We are also in the process of sending out our last reimbursement request for FY20, where we are seeking reimbursement, $30,000 from Freetown CARES funding and another $44,000 from Plymouth County or Lakeville funding. We did have a delay in the receipt of one of our technology orders on Chromebooks due to industry-wide supply chain issues, which related to equipment ordered before June 30th, 2020. Since the $580,000 of costs were encumbered into our general fund and not reimbursed timely enough to count the receipts related to them, our E&D balance for FY20 includes a reduction for these transactions, which were essentially an unfunded deficit at that time. The FY20 expenditures related to PPE and technology, where the majority were represented the district's kickoff of our transition to a one-to-one Chromebook technology plan specifically for grades 6 through 12. For FY21, we are planning on expenditures totaling $2 million, where the largest costs are $500,000 of personal protective equipment, $500,000 for TECA remote learning programs, $503,000 of Chromebooks and related technologies, with a significant amount supporting grades K through 5, $165,000 of staff-related costs for social distancing and enhanced cleaning procedures, and $215,000 for transportation and related cleaning costs. We have approximately $425,000 of planned unfunded transactions that relate to the period January 1st, 2021 through the end of the school year, and have started inquiring with the towns if there may be some additional CARES Act funding to provide assistance. So far for FY21, the way our expenditures are tracking, we may have $80,000 available from the ESSER Round 1 funds to carry forward towards FY22. Additionally, we are expecting to be able to fully utilize $312,000 of ESSER 2 funds towards PP&E, continued professional development, social emotional support for students, and Chromebook replacements. Also, in relation to our COVID expenditures for FY21, we were just notified officially through State Appropriation 7061-0027, the State Coronavirus Prevention Fund Program. We will have an additional funding of $114,875. Eligible uses for the funds include personal protective equipment, hygiene supplies, costs associated with socially distanced on-site learning, remote learning, or hybrid approaches. As you can see, the use of these funds are pretty flexible. The funding will certainly assist us with the spring semester costs provided for in the COVID framework. We are thinking the TECA remote learning for the springtime. I've included this funding source in the COVID materials provided. That concludes my COVID update. Are there any questions?
Yeah, there was about the submission for the CARES for both Lakeville and Freetown. I know what we did with our share. You know, we funded whatever we could, and we still are. Did Freetown submit their share for reimbursement and get funded for that?
So yes, that's correct. So far, Freetown, we've had a few reimbursement requests with them. I want to say that they've been able to provide funding of a little over $350,000 or so. So they've been really supportive as well. And they're looking at their funding currently to see if they have any additional dollars to assist us with. They have been able to provide us with the reimbursements that we've submitted.
Okay, so dollar for dollar, if it was $1, then Lakeville's share was 60% and Freetown's share is 40%. We got our 60. Did they get their 40?
No, not quite. They had not received enough funding similar to Plymouth County. I think it just, the way that it worked was much differently. So they had less funding in their bucket available originally, I think, to assist us with.
But that was lifted.
They did not receive additional funding, I don't
No, but
believe.
that's the state that provides the funding in Freetown's case, not Plymouth and Plymouth County.
So we did receive the state money directly originally for $225 per student. And then Freetown did provide us with additional funding beyond that, which was another $350,000.
Okay, so what's the difference between what Lakeville provided and Freetown did?
I'd have to run those percentages, but I think if we did add the 225 per student, which was about 270,000 plus their 350, I think the ratio of Freetown-Lakeville is much closer to what you would anticipate, which would be your assessment percentages. I'd have to go back and rerun those percentages and see if it is dollar for dollar, like you're suggesting. But I do think that it will be rather close.
Because the CARE Act, as you know, has been extended to December 31st, 2021.
That's correct.
Okay, so there's plenty of money available out there to get reimbursed for anything that has not been reimbursed.
Right, but I do think that they only have a certain amount of funding left that they can assist us with.
And how much was that?
I don't know. I think the last they spoke was maybe another 50,000 potentially.
We got $1.6 million.
Right.
Okay. But I can tell you that unless we see a match, Lakeville's not going to put all that money out.
I believe their original allocation was around 800,000. I could grab the exact figure, but it was about half of.
Well, I think it needs to be looked at, because if we're going to provide, you're saying here, I think you're saying you're going to submit another $2 million unless my numbers are wrong.
No, not another 2 million.
Another million. More than that.
So yes, I'm looking at another 742,000 potentially for Lakeville. Yeah, so I could try to run these totals right now if you'd like and see what the percentages come out to be.
Kara, just as a follow-up, why don't we just, if you were to break it down, what the revenues from Lakeville and Freetown, and see what that percentage is for the group.
And the reason why I'm bringing it up, Mr. Chairman, is that if we're putting in, $1 million, and Freetown is, I'm not picking on Freetown, is not matching those amounts, that deficit is coming out of your budget.
Yep, that's a fair question.
And that's got to be addressed. Because then if it is, then that's affecting Lakeville's assessment, as well.
Mr. Owen?
Yes, Mr. Medeiros.
Just in support, Kara, just to clarify, it's important to note that obviously the mechanism by which we're doing it with town of Freetown is different than the Plymouth County piece. And I know you know that, Rich. So you do need to combine those two numbers, though, what the region was getting, the 200 and some odd thousand and the 3. So it's closer to that initial question you raised, in my opinion, is much closer to that percentage rank, but I know Kara will do those numbers. I would agree.
Yeah, just to give the town by town comparison, it's a fair question.
So then the question becomes, if Lakeville is putting up another, I don't know what the number is, $700,000, and Freetown is putting up another $200,000, right? Who's going to pay that difference?
Well, Rich, if I may, I'm not sure how you came up with a $200,000 number. I'm
just throwing numbers out from a matching standpoint.
Well, no, but I mean, it didn't happen the first time frame. If you combine the 200 and 300, it was over $500,000 that Freetown had no control over the money going directly to us. And so in essence, it would have gone to Freetown as it did in your instance to Lakeville. I agree with you. I'm not debating the fact that, each town should offer their fair share as it relates to that money available to the schools. It's just two different mechanisms. And I think Kara can run those numbers and be sure that moving forward, that it continues to maintain the integrity of the percentages. Sorry.
Absolutely.
I know you're supposed to be submitting another one shortly.
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like to get that answer as soon as possible, please.
Sure.
I think that's something, Before the end of the week, we can get that out to the committee, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, because according to your report here, you're projecting, based on 21, $451,000 deficit. So why is that?
So that's with me. So that's because we do have some unfunded spring costs, if you will. That does not include a projection for us getting in any additional money from Lakeville or Freetown for the spring costs at this point, because we haven't really locked that in. So once we determine if there is funding available from either source, then obviously that deficit would be diminished. That represents the spring costs, the cost beyond December 31st, which was the original CARES deadline.
So what is being submitted to Lakeville right now, or going to be submitted to Lakeville for reimbursement?
That would be the fall FY21. The majority of the large invoices were not received until recently because they represented the Chromebooks that were on delay. And then the other large piece is the fall remote learning. And then the transportation invoices. So a lot of those invoices didn't come in until the very end of the fall. And so some of them were recently paid.
But we had asked, and I know I've discussed this with the superintendent, that we asked you to provide, not picking on you, I don't know who it was who was going to do this, but we asked for a projection on what was needed to be. We haven't got that projection.
I've spoken to Todd several times about the.
Yep.
Yep.
But we haven't got the projection yet. We have no idea what's going to be submitted at this point.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. I had shared information with Todd. I didn't realize that you needed a physical projection. We did speak about the possibility of the board needing something more formal, but I was never informed of anything more formal of a request beyond my discussions with Todd.
Okay. Rick, we had this conversation a while ago, and I had asked for projections. So,
Rich, Steve, if I may, we certainly had the conversation, but I was leaving it up to our two finance people to kind of address that. And I wasn't aware that there was a specific format, and I certainly know that Todd and Kara have been in contact. We certainly can do something more formal, but we felt we were collaboratively working at this and felt that the numbers and things we were sharing was consistent with what you and I had talked about.
Doesn't this break down, just to clarify, the projections? Do you need anything more than, because this is what's going to give you through the spring from a projection perspective. Do you need something more detailed, Mr. LaCamera?
well, there's a couple of things. First of all, originally it's supposed to be December 31st, okay,
Yep.
of last year, okay? And that was it. And then we were supposed to get the projection for that. We didn't get that projection. And well, it hasn't been submitted either yet. And I understand Kara's position on some of it. Then we went into this year, and they've extended it to December 31st, 2021. So my question is that we have expenses too that, we have to submit, to get reimbursement from the town standpoint. So, like I said, we have $1.6 million. And our intention, and as I told the superintendent, we will do everything we can to support the school system and support the town. And I just want to make sure, because if the number's $1 million, then we got a serious problem, because we already spent almost $900,000. So that's all I'm asking for. So what hasn't been submitted that should have been submitted? What's projected to be submitted in the spring? And is there anything coming for fiscal 22?
Kara, can you please take that as an action item so that way we can get that over to both boards so they could see the projections and we'll at least get them what we're supposed to be submitted for December 31st, and then we can get it for the spring as far as the projection.
Sure.
And we just need to make sure that that's consistent with what you've been giving Todd as well.
Yeah, it's really nothing more different than this, except, I guess my question is, would you want more detail beyond this? Because this is the projection.
Well, I would like to know, okay, you got total estimated expenditures of $2 million. $2 million, right?
That's
For all
correct.
of fiscal 21.
Yes,
Is that correct? From
That's correct.
July 1st last year
Mhm.
to
To June
projected
30th.
June 30th, this coming year.
That's correct.
So out of that $2 million, how much has already been paid and reimbursed?
So for fiscal 21, we have not submitted reimbursement requests because I was going to do them in large batches. And Todd and I have discussed this. So for instance, the largest items are going up first, which is essentially the remote learning and the technology items. So those will be generated next week. That was my next plan because I just finished FY20 since we had just paid the last invoices in FY20 recently.
So if you take the $2 million and 60% of that belongs to Lakeville, that's $1.2 million. Is that correct?
That's correct. But, I did have this discussion with Todd about the allocations and we weren't sure that it was going to work that way. And we did have these discussions early on. And what I was told was that Lakeville was willing to support whatever we had and, that we would go back and forth with the projections. And so we've been in contact several times.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
But I don't think Todd knew that there was going to be potentially $1.2 million that was going to, that's my point, is we had no idea what was going to be submitted, an estimate. We only have $1.6 million. If we already spent $800,000, then we only got $800,000 left. And the town is going to need $200,000 or $300,000 themselves. So you got a problem.
Just may I make a statement here? Last time I spoke to Todd, I indicated we might need $1 million from Lakeville, which if you take the original request plus the potential new 742,000, and he said, okay, he said we may have another additional 200,000 on top of that available. So he didn't seem to, at least his conversations with me, he didn't seem to be concerned about where we were at with a reimbursement request at that time.
I'm concerned.
I understand, but
I'm very
wanna communicate.
concerned.
Yeah.
I just want to communicate that I have had these conversations.
I understand, but I can tell you, I know Todd very well. If you said that, we're going to submit $1.2 million and we only got 1.6 and we already spent 8,
Well,
he wouldn't
I
have
have-
said that.
I have Lakeville at 285,000
I'm not
plus.
talking about, talking about the total package for both the regional school district. We got Old Colony too, that we do, they submit expenses too. And, the town side.
Yep.
And,
So Kara, if we could just and if we could put a timetable on by the end of the week, just so that way, Mr. LaCamera and Todd, I would just send it to both of them. So we're all on the same page. What are the projections are through the end of FY21?
Okay.
and then the question is, what is Freetown share going to be?
Sure.
I think we could put that into that whole report is what has been done already and what the percentage breakdown and what the projections are, and then from there. And that way we can level set the discussion on all sides.
But does Freetown have the money?
Kara had mentioned at the beginning that she was actually going to Freetown to have a conversation. So I think that's an open conversation that we'd have to circle back.
Okay, if this doesn't happen, you got a major problem with your budget.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Barron, you had a question?
So Rich, perhaps we're a bit confused here. Are you looking for the school business director to meet with Todd and then also with you? Or are you thinking, I think we're thinking that Todd would pass this information on to you?
He would, yeah, he would. We talk
It
about
sounds
it
like
every.
that's not happening. And so perhaps you and Todd need to talk about that part of it and see where the breakdown. Wait a minute. And see where the breakdown is, because I mean, Kara's got a lot of things to do, 2 towns and all the rest. if you'd rather her go to you than Todd, but to go to two people seems a little cumbersome to me.
No, she can go to Todd. That's not the problem. I'll see Todd tomorrow morning, and discuss this with him, because I can tell I can tell you, his expectations weren't $1.2 million for Lakeville. Additional for the region. I can tell you that.
And my second question would be, should Todd be coming to these meetings?
No, doesn't have to.
Okay, feels like it does.
Well, it's only COVID-19. What is he going to do with the rest of the meeting?
Well, he could, for a Zoom meeting, he could say, thank you very much, and go on. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Owen, Mr. Owen, if I may, as the chair, as Mr. Owen just said, I think as long as Kara supplies that information to both Todd and both representatives, and all parties are involved, I think we'll be fine as far as the communication goes. We'll let the town of Lakeville address their communication. We can let the town of Freetown likewise do the same. Kara, we'll continue. We'll just make sure we document the dialogue that's been happening, and it's been consistent relative to both towns. So we could take care of that, Mr. Owen, as you stated. And I think by the end of the week, we can get something out. And to Mrs. Barron's point, we'll make sure that everybody's included so there's no confusion.
And that timetable, I'm not over expecting anything by the weekend would be fine.
And may I
Correct.
just, yeah, that would be fine. And could I just make one more comment? The
Please do.
reimbursement request for Lakeville is more around $1 million. And that's because we have other funding sources in play here. We have the ESSER Round 1 funding. We have a remote learning tech grant from the state. We have the state coronavirus prevention fund. We have potentially FEMA, which may or may not happen. So that's why it's not a straight calculation. That's why we just can't take the expenditures and do straight percentage. There are other funding sources at play. It's not quite 1.2 million, the request. So I just wanted to further note that.
I
So
understand.
let's just get the breakdown and then we can proceed from there.
Just so you know, if it's FEMA doesn't get reimbursement for the CARES stuff, it's CARES funding. So
The FEMA reimbursements that we requested were prior to the legislation change effective September 15th, where they had originally supported the reopening of schools, but then they did tighten up their legislation. So the possibility is remote that we'll get funding. However, under the Biden administration, they're now going backwards to January 20th, 2020, potentially, to say that they want to loosen the restrictions. So FEMA funding may be a possibility for the school district, and that's breaking news, essentially.
okay. One last question. You're talking about the I guess this is really stimulus money, okay? Having to do with URSA 2, okay, which is the opportunity that to fund 75% of the increase in minimum contribution for the region.
Yes, I was planning on discussing that on the FY22 budget portion of the agenda today.
Okay, so the $312,000 that we're supposed to receive, which the Department of Ed says that we're entitled to that, right?
So our funding is 960,000, and the 312,000 reflects the carve out for the 75% that the town of Freetown or Lakeville could take.
Say that again, please.
So our original funding is 960,000, and I have already carved out the 75% for Freetown and Lakeville. The net amount that we would be eligible to use for PPE and other items is 300,000. So that already reflects the towns taking the ESSER Round 2 monies, 75%, and applying it to the assessment.
That's already in the assessment?
No, it's not reflected in the preliminary budget model, but it's reflected in this number here, the 300,000. So if I showed this number before 75%, it would read as 960,000, but I'm saying the school district would only have 300,000 to use for ourselves. Because Freetown and Lakeville could take a significant piece of the ESSER Round 2 if the legislation passes.
You're confusing me.
The 300,000 that I'm presenting on the COVID spreadsheet already reflects the reduction of the 75% the municipalities could take. The DESI website shows that Freetown-Lakeville has 960,000 of eligible funding. For which,
For this Ursa too?
that's correct.
Okay,
But this spreadsheet is illustrating as if Freetown and Lakeville will take the money to use towards their minimum local contribution. So
Okay.
I think
which is not included in the budget.
that's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on COVID-19 expenses? Okay, move on to new business, 3A FY22 budget.
Our preliminary budget presentation involved the efforts of many school district stakeholders and focused on a model that continues to raise the bar for our district students. The preliminary budget that was presented will likely need some future adjustments as we are still waiting on refined estimates on Chapter 71 transportation funding, RFPs for both health insurance and transportation, which could significantly affect the budget estimates. As it relates to Chapter 70 funding in the preliminary budget, it was held at pre-pandemic enrollment levels, and the state added a provision at current enrollment levels, allowing for $30 per pupil, which raised our Chapter 70 estimate from last year's original budget by $84,000. One major recent possible change that was reflected in the governor's budget will likely affect the assessments to the towns is related to the district's federal ESSER Round 2 funding. Where the district has access to apply for funding of $960,000 toward coronavirus-related expenses supporting schools on in-person remote learning or hybrid models. There is a provision in the House 1 budget that allows member towns to receive 75% or approximately $650,000 of this funding toward increases in their required minimum contributions. This could mean, if the legislation is passed, a reduction of $315,586 for Freetown and $332,799 for Lakeville. It would bring Freetown's increased assessment from 7.22% as presented in our preliminary budget to 4.27%. It would bring Lakeville's increased assessment from 6.30% to 3.88%. We are still waiting for more details from DESI and the municipal finance team. If this were to be utilized, we should all be aware that it creates a budgetary funding gap in future years with this one-time funding replacement opportunity. It's also further important to note that these are all preliminary estimates by the state. They are subject to change as the House and Senate deliberate on the budget. That concludes my FY22 budget summary. Any questions?
Okay,
Mr. Owen, if I may.
yes, sir.
Carrie did a nice job of just, I mean, it's obviously a significant assessment adjustment potentially to consider down the line here for both towns, obviously, and very positively. And obviously that as we move forward in this process, that's a huge factor for both towns to consider relative to the initial budget that we presented. Nice job explaining that. Pretty complicated, but we'll be sure we communicate it to all parties involved continuously. Thanks. Nice job, Carrie.
Thank you.
And the school committee will be getting their books. Some of us already have that, and we'll be starting on the 24th to dive into all the details as well around that.
So, oh, go ahead, Mr. Owen. I know you referenced the 24th, and we can come back to that before we go to the MSBA piece, since you've mentioned that, or you want to come back to that?
Sure, no, we can go there.
Just since we're on 22, part of our initial template as we were trying to roll this out in a fashion that allowed the towns to see the kind of the timeline of when the public hearing would be, when the town meetings were projected, was we did identify February 24th as a joint meeting of the school committee, Board of Selectmen, and Finance. I'm not so sure we shouldn't consider maybe pushing that out to the March 10th. I know probably some boards have already placed it on their calendar. I had a brief conversation with with Rich earlier. So I'm certainly this board can drive that, Steve, and I'm not certainly suggesting we change it, but considering that's only 2 weeks out and we do have, we're waiting for the Board of Selectmen rep from Freetown. Some individuals, officials haven't picked up their books at town hall and so forth. We got a few more. I just put it out there for the group for consideration if we want to move that out at all or just maintain the 24th. Thank you.
I'll open for discussion. Anyone have any thoughts on keeping it as the 24th or moving it to the 10th?
We can't do the 10th,
Okay.
just so you know. The earliest now, we had put it in our calendar is the 24th.
Sure. Understood.
And, we are booked solid until the middle of March.
Mr. Owen, if I may, yeah. So I was actually just following the school committee format. We've certainly scheduled other meetings, to Richard and other people's points on other times and dates, and so I certainly think we can accommodate hearing from both towns if we need to adjust the date and add it separate of a regular scheduled school committee meeting.
Okay. Well, we can take that offline to try and coordinate a date that works for all parties as reasonable as possible.
I'm serious. We are booked all the way through the first week in March with finance committee meetings and selectmen's meetings and planning board meetings, and we're doing search committee for a new town administrator, multiple meetings on that. So the earliest we could do anything is the week of the 15th of March. So,
And does that reflect both Lakeville Finance as well as Lakeville Board of Selectmen?
No, and then, we have a couple of meetings with the finance committee. Then we have regularly scheduled selectmen's meetings. We have planning board meetings with the projects, with a major project in town. So, well, I mean, if you weren't going to do it on the 24th, then the 2 weeks after that are literally booked the whole week.
Understood. So that's why I wanted to at least to coordinate with Mr. Medeiros, and we could potentially move the school committee meeting to a different date that doesn't conflict with your crazy schedule over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's funny because last Monday night, the board sat down and looked at all of our dates and we penciled in the 24th, on our calendar. So.
Okay.
Mr. Owen, I think we can accommodate some adjustments there as we got the chair and vice chair here and involve all the groups involved and make an adjustment that meets everybody's needs there.
Moving on to item 3B on the agenda, MSBA 21-22 application process.
Can I go back to the budget, please?
Yes, you may.
I thought we were going to go through the presentation of the budget, but I guess not. So, based upon what's being requested, which is about a total of 4% increase in the budget, I believe. If I remember them, a 4.35% increase in the budget. And the assessments, that are being proposed, currently being proposed. Lakeville going up 965,000, which is a 6.3% increase, and Freetown's going up 7.22. There's no way we can afford that, so I just want to be upfront right now. There's no sense wasting everybody's time. I can tell you that, overall from the town's perspective, we got $1.1 million available to spend. So we got the request here for Freetown-Lakeville of $965, $280,000 from Old Colony, and $100,000 from Bristol Aggie. So, and that doesn't leave anything else available for the town side. So I think that from a realistic standpoint, those are simple math. I mean, it's just simple math, I'm not making those numbers up. So just so you know.
No, I appreciate that feedback. Okay.
Darren, do you agree with me? I mean, Darren, you haven't said much over there.
I'm just listening, Rich. No, I mean, the numbers are what they are, right? So we can only give what we have. So.
Mr. Owen, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So Kara, correct me though, but that potential ESSER adjustment would have a significant impact on that assessment for both towns, that alone.
That is correct. If that passes, and the towns choose to take their share, then yes, it will have a significant impact.
The concern I have with that is, Kara, as you mentioned, it's problematic future years, right?
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah, right.
one-time fix. I think we've done a good job in the last couple of years to not do that. So I think we need to keep that train. So that would be my big concern. I don't want to sit there and solve a one-year problem and then have to come back to the drawing board with a bunch of headaches next year.
I agree. And, oh, sorry, Rich.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, if I may, I agree, Mr. Owen. Mr. LaCAM, if you could, do you have any, I know you referenced some numbers there. Do you have a parameters or something we should be shooting for relative to, I know it's early on in the process. This has kickstarted our budget process with the school committee. They haven't had a chance to discuss it. Is there a number that Lakeville?
The Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee haven't even had a chance to, talk about that. I mean, we got our budgets all compiled and we have, preliminary numbers all together, but it's like anything else, like you say, it's a moving target, for us. But if you look at it from a state aid standpoint, we wound up getting, $23,000 more than last year. That's it. No state aid. So everything that we're relying on is new growth and 2.5% increase.
Yeah. And not to pick on my vocational colleagues, but those assessment numbers are certainly increasing significantly, even with a small percentage of students involved for the town.
Well, we've already told Gold Colony we can't support a $280,000 increase. So,
Okay.
But I think that if the opportunity is there for this money, certainly ought to take care of it. But I would think that the school committee should not, add the staff and everything that's included in there, knowing that in fiscal 23, this money is not going to be available.
Mr. Owen, if I may, Rich, I don't think there was any assumption there. I mean, obviously that budget presentation hasn't even allowed the committee to begin making some, significant decisions relative to staffing and some of those things that you've referenced there. You're absolutely correct. I know the committee members that are present tonight, Mr. Owen, Ms. Fox, as they've done in previous years with me. Now I'm starting my 8th year. I certainly anticipate some of those hard questions and decisions to be made in the coming weeks moving forward.
Okay.
Any other questions on the budget?
There's a lot, but I'm not going there now. So.
Nope. As do we, and we will be going through the school committee process.
So when is the school committee going to review this, Mr. Chairman?
Our next school committee meeting is the 24th of February.
Okay.
So we will be going through that. Last couple of years, we've cut it out into 2 meetings. We review half the budget and then go to the second half. Really focus on making some decisions as far as what's cutting out, what do we need to keep in, those types of discussions.
So then why don't you want that joint meeting between the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and the school committee to be that day?
Because typically that meeting with everybody, the budget has been picked apart by the school committee first, and then to go around with the town boards. So it allows the school committee to go through the process, and then it'll give the towns the opportunity to ask questions along from there. If you care to want to attend that meeting, that's fine. I have no objection to that.
No, but I guess I don't understand why the schedule was put together and you told us we were going to meet on the 24th jointly, and the school committee wasn't planned to meet prior to that date then, if you didn't want to. I don't understand.
So that, Mr. Owen, if I may, I could accept some responsibility on that. As Kara and I built the budget and put this together, we pushed back our budget presentation several weeks, and that meeting historically has been at the end of February. Rich, Gene, and Steve can speak to that. And the reality is the budget process has started later, which has been helpful in some instances because it's allowed us to have some more concrete numbers relative to the state But I hear your point. We left it there as a placeholder. Certainly, Board of Selectmen could join the committee in the initial discussions, but as Steve has referenced, committee has typically had a couple of meetings prior to that conversation. We're also up against it, as you well know, that the town meeting, when I say up against it, it's just the reality of the time frame. We typically have another month to prepare this budget process, but with the town of Lakeville looking at a town meeting in early May, it certainly crunched the schedule a little bit, which we can make do, but that's just part of the reality of this year.
We're going ahead with May 10th. No ifs, ands, or buts, just so you know. We're not moving it. There's no reason to move it.
I fully supported the use of our facility, Mr. Klim. You know that, so we're set for May 10th.
Yeah. I just don't see any changes in the budget numbers. I mean, the House and everybody says, oh, let's wait for the House and the Senate. They don't get a budget done until July. It just does no purpose. We're just going to use the numbers we have. Well, we don't expect a big increase anyways,
Moving on to MSBA 2021-22 application process.
In relation to our capital plan, we have provided in the budget book a 5-year plan and a 3-year plan provided for technology, which is similar to what we have done in the past. The most critical items relate to, as far as a current need, relate to fire panel migration required for devices, for which our vendor has provided quotes for a multi-year upgrade. In the first year, the projected cost shown on the plan is about $175,000. It covers the high school, the middle school, intermediate school, Freetown Elementary, and the district's wastewater treatment plant. However, our director of facilities is actually currently working with other vendors to see if the equipment really needs to be replaced all at once, or if it can be done over a longer phase. We are also obtaining other pricing estimates. All the vendors that we've consulted with so far are covered under state contract. As it relates to building envelope repairs in the capital plan, the majority of which are window and future roof replacements, I am recommending that the district look into further assessing the condition of these repairs and replacements and considering options in the future, such as MSBA Accelerated Repair Program, which will open this spring for an application process. My understanding is that the district did not apply the last round, but we are looking to apply the next round here in the spring. There are also some needs for flooring, sidewalk, walkway repairs for intermediate school, Assawamsett and Freetown Elementary, for which we should discuss the town's ability to support and/or timing of the potential projects. For technology, included in the operational budget was $34,000 for the high school for an intercom, clock and bell system, a system for which parts are no longer available, and the system is well beyond its life. We actually have received an updated quote since the preliminary budget, for which the cost came in at $50,000. And in the next few years, the district would be looking at upgrading our wired network, for which we would consider a hybrid of funding of E-rate and possibly town funding. Any questions on the capital update?
Mr. Owen?
Yep.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Sorry, Rich. No, I just wanted to clarify just for the group, because there may be some questions. So for several years, if I may, Mr. Owen, just to Kara's point, it predates her. For several years, and I think we had some board members here where we did submit to the MSBA funding for a potential building project at Assawamsett Elementary School. It was part of the larger project, right, for the entire building look. This past year, with our focus with Train and our energy efficient project, we did not submit a statement of interest for either the accelerated piece, which probably makes more sense now than the previous, where we were ultimately denied. So I just wanted to clarify, one, we didn't submit a grant this past year. Typically, actually, the grant application process starts around this month, but even MSBA is a little behind in this kind of unique year. But we anticipate, as Kara has shared, that application process would open up and we can take a look at and potentially pursue a grant with MSBA relative to Assawamsett. Some of those other projects, we're going to have to look at other sources of funding. They don't fall within the guidelines or the criteria for MSBA. Thank you.
So are we supposed to anticipate some requests for capital funding?
Well, I wanted to, I mean, this is my first go around with Freetown and Lakeville, so I wanted to understand what if there was an appetite for these types of projects, or will, are there potential for funding here? I understand that the process would be at the annual town meetings. We'd put in a potential warrant request. So I just want to open the conversation up.
The warrant requests are due March 8th.
Okay.
But we hadn't planned on it, let's put it that way.
I know a number of these items were rolled forward from the prior year plan. And I'm new here, so I don't know what the context was with the prior discussions, unfortunately. So that's why,
So in years past, capital has been, a number of them in the operating. We've been moving them out of the operating budget, so they'd be more focused on that. Prior committee discussions last year, we did put a warrant article on the town meeting, which I believe was for the truck. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, correct?
No, it was for wireless stuff.
That was I believe a special town meeting, but the main town meeting. But neither here or there. There were separate warrant articles that were presented.
So the current budget, if I may, Mr. Owen, the current budget that we presented does not have separate article broken out. Kara is what I think is most pressing right now. We're addressing a lot of it through our train project, and some things will carry over. The most pressing thing that's kind of evolved quite candidly is that the fire panel piece, and the school committee needs to have a conversation relative to, are we able to absorb that in our operational budget, which has already been presented. Rich, to your point, we have not put that out as a separate article to date for the upcoming town meeting.
Okay, we need to know.
I understand.
I know. Because, we can't make up money. So,
No,
okay. In prior years, Mr. LaCamera, the focus for capital, we were directed to more towards the special town meetings or the fall town meetings.
I don't know where that came from, but okay.
That's what I'm saying with prior committee members in that particular case. We can change that and put more of a focus on it. Until we can just let you know what any immediate capital that we want to request, obviously not necessarily a given, but we could put that request to you by the 8th to at least have that.
And what is that going to be? Which one are you requesting?
To say the fire panel migration project would be the most critical. However, as I stated, we are working with a second vendor to see their opinion to ensure that the first vendor that we're working with is really giving us the correct advice. So because it is a large project, we're just having someone else take a second look. So that meeting is occurring on February 17th with our director of facilities. They're looking to see if there are other options at replacing, to see if there's a real critical need, which is what the first vendor communicated to us. But the equipment hasn't failed, so we are taking a second look at it.
Okay, has anybody had any discussions with the fire chief?
So the fire chief did come to do his annual review before school opened, and I don't believe that this was a concern that came up. So I will once again talk to the director of facilities to see if he can reach out to the fire chief as well to get his opinion.
Yeah, because if you're changing boxes or companies or whatever, you got to make sure that they work in conjunction with the fire department.
Rich, if I may, so yeah, Kara, obviously Greg's been in direct communication with the fire department and also building inspector as it relates to the project and some of the work we did last summer and certainly any subsequent, and we certainly will do that.
Well, it's not just our building inspector, it's also Freetown too. Freetown's on this list.
Yes, they are. That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, just again, Freetown's piece relates to the one school the main campus has been our primary focus on a lot of these devices.
I understand, but I'm sure that the Freetown Elementary School is tied into the fire department. Right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
know.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I muted myself. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
On the MSBA, obviously we know that the town board of selectmen would have to vote on that to move forward. Is that something the town is willing to do? Is that something that you would have to discuss with the board?
Well, it starts with the superintendent and the school committee to vote on it first before it gets to the board.
No, I understand that. Just an initial read. I didn't want to go through the exercise if the town couldn't support it in any way of that aspect of it. Just more of saving people's time. But if it's something of interest, we can continue down that road.
Well, I don't know what's being presented. I mean, nobody's told us anything.
Okay.
How do we make a decision on something we don't even know?
Okay.
Well,
Right?
and I, Mr. Owen, if I may, the reason you haven't been informed is because they haven't opened up the process yet, so we can get the details behind what exactly the scope would be with some guidance. Once that happens, we certainly will communicate that to our school board and to the town.
Well, I'm more interested in the accelerated program, especially for some of the things I see. Freetown's got some things on here too that they could apply for, along with the region and Assawamsett. So it's not just Assawamsett. And looking at some of these numbers here, but like window replacements. I mean, as an example, the stimulus money that's going to be approved here shortly. There's huge amount of money in there for reimbursement having to do with ventilation systems and improving the environment and in the schools and windows and all of that stuff. And we ought to be looking at that stuff.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other business that may come before the meeting? I do want to just to recap. I know there's some action items that are coming out of this. One, we do need to follow up on the health insurance. Ms. Lees, I think that is on your plate as far as the basis from one year to another. We can get back to the full committee there. Also, the topic around the TRAN project, the lease versus bond.
Okay.
And obviously, you already confirmed that there has been no change order, so that should be taken care of. The report, which we agreed by week's end, which is the CARES fund comparison by town in the percentage, so that way the towns can see what's already in the percentage breakdown in a projection.
Okay.
Okay. I know when you get a budget books to the Freetown reps, so we'll coordinate that. Are we dropping those off at Freetown Town Hall? Is that the agreement?
Yes.
Steve, just to clarify, we're doing that for both towns because there's some additional books that need to get to Lakeville as well. We'll take care of that in the same time frame this week.
Okay, great. That's right, and you'll coordinate whether it's the police station, town hall, or what have you, so the reps can get their books there. Okay. Any other action items? All right. As I said, next meeting is the 24th, but we'll follow up very quickly in the next day or so just to whether we want to continue with that date. And I understand Lakeville's concern about being booked to mid-March. So we will definitely keep that in mind as well. All right. With that, nothing else on the agenda. It is 7:44. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, just clarification, the Regional Finance Committee is not meeting on the 24th either, right?
This was a joint meeting, so it would be a regional, it's considered a regional finance, but it's a joint meeting between the school committee, Board of Selectmen, and Finance.
Okay,
But this small group would not be meeting, it would be meeting all together, part of that.
okay, so when are we gonna find that out?
I will, as I said, I just mentioned that I will confirm that in the next day or so to get everything back and coordinated.
Thank you.
We'll update the adjournment time of 7:45 and motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And Mr. LaCamera with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Where it is being recorded, we do need a quick roll call. Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Ms. Calheta,
Yes.
Mr. LaCamera,
Aye.
Mr. Beals,
Aye.
and myself, Mr. Owen, also aye. Thank you very much.